Today on the Big 6 in 60, the Cardinals hire Mike LaFleur as head coach.
Now the Cardinals have their first choice.
The Clippers could trade James Harden.
So why in the world would James Harden be asking out?
And quarterback Joey Aguilar sues the NCAA for eligibility.
Joey Aguilar suing the NCAA, taking the NCAA to court here in Knox County.
This is the Big 6 in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big 6 in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Cardinals have hired their next head coach in former Rams offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur, the brother of Packers head coach Matt LaFleur. Locked On Cardinals host Alex Clancy gives you his thoughts on the hire.
The Arizona Cardinals got their guy, hiring Mike LaFleur to a 5-year deal after whiffing on Clint Kubiak, after Mike LaFleur reportedly whiffed on the Raiders job because they offered it to Clint Kubiak. Now the Cardinals have their first choice. I mean, it's been an interesting juggling over the last 10 days or so. It's been an interesting process lasting, 28 or 29 days. And now the Cardinals have their guy for the next 5 years, and we'll see how it goes. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So here's the thing, man. There's some initial pros and cons. We'll discuss that in the second segment. There's the what's next on the pecking order conversation, which I'll discuss in the third. But overall, could be worse. We don't know a lot about this guy outside of him having some flashes with the Jets as the offensive coordinator under Robert Saleh, with Zach Wilson and others as quarterback. Garrett Wilson won Rookie of the Year that year, I believe. George Kittle broke the record for receiving yards for a tight end when he was with the 49ers in either 2018 or 2019. And he's on the McVay and Shanahan tree, which is something that everybody salivates over. That's what we know. What we also know is the Rams offense has been really good since he's been there. Hasn't been calling the plays, but he's been a part of that offense. And obviously through osmosis and mentorship, being around Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay can do nothing but help. That's about all we know. So when you went from, not being able to get the people you really wanted, there were obviously, fringe guys at best to even look to the Arizona Cardinals for a potential offer. They're going with the times and signing a young offensive-minded guy that seemed to have worked well for many teams. Finally, I can put to rest I hope it's not Vance Joseph, it's going to be Vance Joseph kind of thing. When I read those tea leaves wrong, it was hypothetical and it was circumstantial, and all I was doing was looking at situational things, be like, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if this were the case. Never said I wanted that to be the case, but now they're on a high wire act without a safety net. If there were to be a safety net, it'd be Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan's tutelage. That said, we don't know what it is yet. I know a lot are like, oh, I'm so excited for Mike LaFleur. Cool, that's great. It's great to feel good things about this team. It's great to feel good things about this team. We don't know what it is yet. So I'm reserving judgment with maybe a little bit more excitement of the unknown than fear. But this is a guy who wanted another opportunity, didn't get it, and settled for the Cardinals. That's not to say that he's not going to quickly ingrain himself in the fibers of State Farm Stadium and be a great leader at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just, the Cardinals didn't get, quote unquote, their guy. They got a guy who is very smart, young, offensive-minded, with great teachers. That's who they got. And that could bear fruits to incredible things. And you hope it does. You hope it does. Big questions, one of which is answered. He is going to be calling the plays, reported by local radio today. I think Gambo reported it. He will be calling the plays. Okay. My biggest thing going into this cycle was it's difficult to be a first-time head coach and to call plays also. Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay make it look easy. That's not to say it's like, oh, cool, it's going to be the same thing. Sweet, guys. Now, a mini pro to that is, reading, watching, talking to people that I know, around the Jets organization and with the Rams. They're saying his offense is weird, like good weird. His offense has got wrinkles. It's got twitch to it. It's not run, play action, deep pass. So I think the most exciting part about all of this is what can happen with Marv. It's what can happen with Michael Wilson. It's what can continue to happen with Trey McBride if there is another level that he can hit in another offense. And I think the majority of it for me is what this, not the majority, a large chunk of this could be, is going to be for me is what the run game is going to be. Because they run the ball very well in both San Francisco and Los Angeles. Breece Hall had a very good year under Mike LaFleur. A lot of it was home run stuff early on for Breece. But, if you're reading the tea leaves and you want to put everything together with like construction paper at this point, because they're all coming from different parts of the country with different teams, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. I think it's a weakness of mine to look around and look in the past of the Cardinals and say, first-time head coach, first-time play caller. And I'm not comparing him to Cliff Kingsbury for 1 second. It's just that was the last we experienced of this. It was the last we experienced of this. So when you look at where they are now, you look at the roster construction, sure, we're going to talk so much about Kyler Murray because he's now part of the plot again. We're going to talk so much about Kyler. He's part of the plot again. Can Mike LaFleur run a Kyler Murray-friendly offense? Can you run a Kyler Murray-friendly offense? Don't know. At least this is the example that I use. When you get little anxiety, I have like 5 things I have to do. I haven't even written them down yet. I haven't put them on a list yet. So you write them down on a list and you check that first box. There's that little, the first inaugural exhale. That's what's happened. And I guess you could say now the Cardinals have the third best play caller in the NFC West because Clint Kubiak's gone. Maybe. I don't know, man. I was a little bit more down about it this past weekend. It's just how it happened. Just didn't look good. Didn't look good for both sides. Like, all right, so both of them wanted the apple of the eye of the Raiders or Clint Kubiak, but flipped. And now it's like, oh, got our guy. It's like, no, you didn't. You got a guy who I'm sure you respect and everything like that, but this seems much more like an arranged marriage than what both sides actually wanted. Hopefully, doesn't matter. Hopefully, they'll hit the ground running, whatever cliche you want to use. They'll hit a solid free agency, knock the draft out of the park, and be ready to rip in 2026, regardless of who the quarterback is.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions start into play, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, that's just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. As Thursday's trade deadline approaches, the Clippers could move on from star guard James Harden. Locked On Clippers host Darian Vaziri goes over the price tag on Harden and which teams could want him.
James Harden has said multiple times he wants to retire a Clipper. So why in the world would James Harden be asking out? And this broke at exactly 8:26 p.m. The Los Angeles Clippers and 11-time All-Star James Harden are working through whether the sides can find a deal by Thursday's NBA trade deadline, sources tell ESPN. Both sides are aligned in conversations together and with interested teams. So my first thought was it has to be something contract related. And this is James Harden's contract situation right now. James Harden is getting paid $39 million this year, but I guess the amount's not fully guaranteed. And then he has a player option for next year that he can opt in and get paid $42,317,307. He wants, usually players are re-upping before the last year of their player option. When they're a star of that caliber, they want to get a new contract. They want to get some more guaranteed money. The Clippers want all the big-time contracts like Kawhi and James off the books in 2027 to go a different direction. That's been pretty public information. James Harden is obviously not going to retire next year. He's too good still. So he probably wants a verbal guarantee because he's technically not extension eligible yet. But he probably wants a verbal guarantee similar to how the Philadelphia 76ers situation went, where he feels, okay, you guys are going to extend me. You're going to give me that faith. Because if you're James Harden, you are 36 years old. You never know when an injury can happen. So that's my biggest thought, is that this is happening because of contract reasons. James Harden wants to re-up. He wants to get probably some kind of verbal confirmation that we're going to extend him. And the Clippers are not about that. Apparently, they've been discussing, according to Brett Siegel, James Harden and the Clippers have been discussing a potential split for weeks, sources told Clutch Points and Tomer Azarly. So, and more information. League sources told Clutch Points that tonight's news was brought forth by James Harden and his camp, as the Clippers were stunned to find out about him wanting out. There's more to that tweet, but I'll talk about that later. Although the team that they're saying is the Cavaliers. I'll talk about their angle, but that's the team that's been named in these rumors. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the team that the Clippers have had talks with, but I'm just so in shock. And for those that are wondering, what are we going to do? Obviously, that depends on the return, but my initial thought was, wow, you knew that this was going to happen eventually, right? You knew that there was going to be a point where James Harden, he wants to retire a Clipper. He was going to want to stay here past 2027, and the Clippers, because I've always wondered that. I was like, James is going to want to stay past 2027. Do they know that? What's going to happen when those conversations come about? And are they going to give in and have James Harden stay, even though they want to go a different direction, allegedly, in 2027? And it seems like they're standing their ground on that. And I think they're absolutely in the right. So it sounds like another Paul George type of situation. And there might be a lot of fans that are saying it's a bummer because, James is still so good and he's having in terms of scoring, he hasn't averaged this many points since 2019-20. I mean, he got snubbed completely from the All-Star game, but you figured we weren't going to have two All-Stars when we're 23 and 26 or 23 and 25 when they were announced. But not having one is insane. Besides the point, James Harden's averaging 25, 5, and 8 this year at age 36, and he started 44 games. He's only missed 4 games this whole season. Come on now. Actually, 5 games this whole season. But he's playing really good basketball at the end of the day. He's playing really good basketball. So it's just kind of not a great thing for the team. The guy that's being mentioned is Darius Garland. Darius Garland, I think he's a very good player. He has availability issues, though, compared to Harden, and he's just not as good as even this version of Harden, in my opinion. I think the only year that it was you can make a comparison was last year, but I still think Harden was, the weight that he had to carry was so much greater than Darius Garland, and James Harden also has that playoff experience that Darius Garland just doesn't have. So in the short term, I don't think that this is going to help the Clippers for James Harden to get traded. Now, the question is it actually going to happen? There's rumors that the Cavs want a pick as well. It's like, are you kidding me? Why would we do that? We don't. If they want to pick, I'm hanging up the phone. The question is James Harden going to sit out now? Is he going to pull the fat suit stuff where he plays and he's quitting? I feel like he wouldn't do that to this team. feel like the Clippers have been good to him. You know, we've been seemingly in lockstep the whole way through, and James has said good things about the organization, and the organization has done the same with James. You know, James's tenure with the Clippers has been overwhelmingly positive, despite, you can say, the lack of playoff success. But James Harden's been the constant that's been available, and that's been that rock for the Clippers. You know what I'm saying? These last 2.5 years since he's been on the team. So, you know, it makes sense that he feels like he deserves something. And it makes sense that the Clippers are standing their ground. The question is like, what's the relationship right now between James Harden and the front office and Lawrence Frank and Trent Redden? You know, what's the relationship? Because if he's like pissed off James Harden, then we're not going to get a great James Harden anymore. I mean, now we know why he's missed games. So is he sitting out? Because he didn't play against Phoenix. He didn't play against Philly. And it's in personal reasons. That was the reason. He wants out. Something has gone on in the background with probably contract negotiations. So we're going to probably get more information in the coming days. But it's just one of the biggest shocks of my time as a Clipper fan to hear this news on Monday night. Absolutely crazy. But yeah, there hasn't been a specific big article that has talked about the main reason why, but everybody seems to suspect it's contract related.
The transfer portal is still in high gear in college football, but don't forget about those high school recruits either. Georgia landed the top running back in the class of 2027, and Locked On Bulldogs tells you what he'll bring to the backfield.
The big news of the day. Spell all the way up from PA. We're having a pipeline of PA recently of just hits after hits after hits. Comes on down. It includes a big weekend on campus at Georgia, snow covered and all, and decides, you know what? I want to go to RBU. Comes on over, commits to Georgia when everybody was saying Penn State was the lock. Everybody said, no, Penn State's it. He's going there. Nope. He comes on down to Georgia. Let's first talk about what you see about Spell, the prospect on film. What stands out to you the most when you watch this kid?
Well, it's kind of nice to see a little bit more of that Pennsylvania pipeline coming down with DeAndre Swift and that look too. But what I think we see from Spell is I have the ability to look at a kid and be able to see his dimensions, his specs, because you have these kids that are really built well up top. They're real skinny down low. They don't have very good swivel in their hips. They don't have the ability to change direction. The first thing you see on film, there's a reason why he's the number one running back in the nation, number 3 nationally, number one running back, but number 3 nationally in the 2027 class, is the general fact his center of gravity is perfect. He's got a great lower body that allows him to move very well because he's obviously got top line speed and can run away from people. But his strength is something that you look and see on film that's very impressive. For him to be able to lower his head and run over people, even at the high school level, is impressive. But be able to put his foot in the ground, change direction, and then not really lose that speed, that's something that's very impressive to me. But you look at his upper body, sometimes you'll have a running back that has a larger torso with shorter legs, and that changes their center of gravity. What he, to me, fits is a spec that not a lot of running backs have. And to me, he's going to be one of the most special running backs we have seen specimen-wise, probably since just overall physicality of what Nick Chubb brought to us and the way he's built and the way he carries himself. I don't really say that necessarily he's going to fit the same profile as Nick Chubb, but I like what I see in just his overall vision, his speed, his power, his cutting ability. He brings it all to the table.
I'm so glad you said that. We're going to talk about one of the favorite things that I saw on film, and his speed and size and strength. They're all there, but those are important. You have to have those to play running back. I'm actually more impressed with some of the things you just mentioned, and it makes sense to me. I loved, by the way, Maurice Jones-Drew back in the day. Maurice Jones-Drew was just this little fire hydrant of a running back, and his center of gravity, his ability to get through the line. Everybody looked at this kid, and I'm not talking about the off-field stuff, people, so don't get at me for that. I'm talking about in the game. He had this low center of gravity that was really, really incredible. It was so hard to bring down, and it didn't matter. He played up because he had complete control of his body in running and changing directions. You mentioned that he has physicality standpoint, the Nick Chubb, and I'm so glad that you caveat. We're not talking about even style of run nor productivity. We're just talking about composition of a kid coming in. I really like that. If you look at him right now, depending on the recruiting service, 5'9", 5'10", 205, he's got just a spectacular. Yes, like if I were to say, hey, go make a running back in a lab, coach, this is what you'd come back with.
Yeah, and people don't, that's not hyperbole either, Clint. I really feel like that he fits a profile where you see his top part of his body absolutely built perfectly, not too big, not too thick, got a strong enough body where he can lower the head, able, to swivel inside, especially gap running. And his lower body is proportional to, I know a lot of people say, are you kidding me? You're actually comparing his lower body to his upper body torso. That ratio is very important. If you want to have a low center of gravity that's natural, that has the ability to cut in space and move without having to topple over because you're top heavy, and and then the ability, like I said, with his overall strength, it's like taking yourself and run into a fire hydrant, and that's what I feel like you see in him. That's the reason why I kind of compared that composition to Nick Chubb, just built solid
all the way through, and you see it not only it's easy. Oh gosh, it's not easy. I shouldn't say that. It's easier when you're man up in the hole and guys coming down. You could see them coming, and you're going to prepare yourself. You're going to get ready. It's a lot harder to take those quick hits from somebody else coming in at an angle, which is why angle and tackling is so important. And for him to bounce off those or to run through those with contact, that's that composition you're talking about. The muscle, the ability, the balance to take hits unforeseen, don't know they're coming, and yet still keep going with the relative same speed through the hole.
You would see there's many kids that I've analyzed over the years running the football to naturally multitask when you run. You don't think that that's something that someone can do, but when you have the ability to have the vision to see the hole, but keep your eyes up and be able to take on somebody that's trying to get to you, shed the block, change speed, move in a different direction, all simultaneously happening at the same time. And, he shows on film too that he is definitely willing to punish you if you do get in his way as well. I love that he put in there a couple of plays where, man, he's at the end zone about to go over the goal line, and kid tries to challenge him, and he just says, welcome to this game, brother. And he basically baptizes him in the way that you don't want to be baptized on film. So
that's right.
It's very nice.
I loved as well. This kid's running back through and through, one of the top recruits there. But on his film, on his highlight film, he put in strong safety film where he was coming up and licking guys, and he's excited for that. You see him get up, and this is one of the things I love what he brings to the table. Honestly, when you play for Kirby Smart, you have to love football. If you only love one aspect of football, good luck. You're not going to make it at Georgia. You're not going to make it in the NFL. This is what Kirby is saying. This kid loves every single aspect of the game. So when he makes a big hit on defense and he stops a team from getting a first down, he celebrates. He doesn't think, well, it's not a 6-yard, 7-yard average game. I didn't go for 150 and 2 tuds. No, this kid loves it. And he loves the physicality aspect at that size. It's incredible. One of the other things, and I want to touch on this before we go. You said vision. Coach, it's my number one thing when I look at running backs. Garrison Hurst and Frank Gore are two of my favorite all-time running backs. And the reason why is because their vision. They had physicality. Talk about Frank Gore. He's about the same size combination that we're talking about, Spell. The vision to know and to set up, to pause, to slow before you get there. It's not a downhill sprint. I think Zeus was really good physically, but he was sprinting 24/7 without the play developing. And that was his only drawback. He has incredible vision for his age, I think.
Yeah, it's natural instincts too. That just like you mentioned on defense, when you watch a kid play defense, like I watch his eyes, I watched his feet and how he backpedals into position, baiting a quarterback to throw on the few defensive plays that he has. That's nice to show on defense when you're an offensive recruit because it shows instinct. And that's something that I'm sorry. You make a good coach great when you have players. I had a kid that went and played for Virginia Tech that my first year coaching as a defensive back. His name was Dorian Porch. He was our quarterback as well as a secondary cornerback. Went to play at Virginia Tech, played right beside Cam Chancellor at Virginia Tech. He made me look so good as a defensive back coach because I could teach him technique and fundamentals. I was growing to learn as a young coach as well, but he was naturally instinctive and someone that just made you look better than what you were because he was just a ball player. And that's what I see in him. And obviously why he's definitely at the top of the list and the number one running back in the nation.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. We have another lawsuit in college football. Tennessee quarterback Joey Aguilar has sued the NCAA over eligibility, and Eric Kane breaks down the situation on Locked On Vols.
Joey Aguilar suing the NCAA, taking the NCAA to court here in Knox County, and why I believe this is a good move for Joey Aguilar, in my expert legal opinion. Rolls eyes, but I do think this gives him more options. We'll get into that here in segment number 1. The possibilities that he could win this thing and he could be Tennessee's starting quarterback in 2026. Mailbag questions coming up in segment 2. Appreciate you guys as always, and we'll check in with Alex Dono of Locked On Hurricanes on Jadaeus Richard, Tennessee's cornerback from the Miami Hurricanes in the transfer portal. All that and more coming up later on in the show here in segment number 3. Appreciate you guys as always, making Locked On Vols a part of your morning routine, your first listen, your first watch each and every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day, the number one sports podcasting network, and everydayers couldn't do this show without you. Join the Everydayer Club, $5 a month. You get an ad-free audio version of the show, access to the Locked On merch store, access to the Locked On Everydayer Discord channel. We can get in there and talk in a group chat. That is lockedonvols.supercast.com, lockedonvols.supercast.com, just $5 to join the Everydayer Club. All right, so Adam Sparks of Knox News had the report on Monday afternoon, did a really good job of breaking some things down. Of course, that's been out there in the public for about 12 hours now or so. Probably a little bit more by the time you're listening to this. So does a really good job of breaking down kind of what all this means. Essentially, Joey Aguilar is suing the NCAA. Well, again, I'm not going to act like I'm an expert in legal jargon. I'm an expert in how all this goes about. I've covered 2 legal cases at the University of Tennessee the last couple of years. I haven't really played point person on this one. So I get the language a little bit, but I am far from an expert in terms of how this is all going to go. Again, I've said this numerous times. If I could go back in all my years in schooling, because I was there forever, and if I could take some legal classes, common law, stuff like that, I would in a heartbeat, because we're seeing this more and more in the industry nowadays. But I have seen some cases, and I kind of understand the basis of what's going on, but I am far from an expert, so I'm not trying to be that. I'm just getting that out there in the open right now. Joey Aguilar is suing the NCAA, taking them to court. And you probably thought, well, he's already doing that, right? Here's the difference. Joey Aguilar was a part of Diego Pavia's lawsuit against the NCAA. He was a plaintiff in that suit. He was one of about 25, 26 other players in his position trying to get the NCAA to negate the JUCO years against him, not to allow those junior college years to count against their NCAA eligibility. Well, why does this matter nowadays? Of course, it means that you can play another year, but also it means even more nowadays because you can get another year of rev share. You have another year to profit off your name, image, and likeness. And let's be completely frank here, guys. People like Nico Iamaleava, players like Nico Iamaleava, and those like him in terms of in that ballpark of older, out of eligibility, might latch on to an NFL training camp of some sorts. Take Zakai Ziegler, for example. He's a perfect example. That's why he was trying to continue to sue and try to get back in the game as much as he could last year, because you're never going to make as much money playing this sport ever again. You might get a training camp, you might get a tryout here and there, but Joey Aguilar is likely never going to make as much money as he made playing at the University of Tennessee ever again. And so if there's another year to profit off that, you're going to do everything in your power to do just that. I don't blame him whatsoever for doing that. I don't blame Diego Pavia, whose blanket waiver allowed Joey Aguilar, Miles Kitzelman, Star Thomas, Trinidad Chambliss, and all these other guys around the league and around the country to play another year of eligibility. I don't blame these guys whatsoever. Again, I went on a tangent last week and I talked about Charles Bediako, and we'll bring him up here in just a moment. Overall thoughts on this, my opinion, it's not good for the game. But I don't blame these guys for trying. Also, there's a big-time difference in what Trinidad Chambliss is trying to do at Ole Miss compared to Joey Aguilar at Tennessee. What Joey Aguilar is doing at Tennessee, what Charles Bediako's already done at the University of Alabama. They're all different. And the outlier here is Bediako has literally played professional basketball and is coming back to college. To me, again, amateurism's out the window, but to me, if there's ever a line in the sand, Bediako was past it, and he's come back and crossed that line in the sand. Again, he's the only one in this whole situation that has literally played professional sports and is coming back to college. There's been reports out there of a former NBA player that is trying to come back to college now. And you knew it was going to happen sooner or later, right? When Bediako did what he did, what the Baylor kid did, what they did. Again, Bediako is different from the former G League players that are playing in college basketball right now because, to my knowledge, again, Charles Bediako is the only one that played in college, left, and has now come back. And now you got a former NBA player trying to do the same thing that's still within that window. Basketball's pushing that boundary, right? Baseball could benefit from it the most, in my opinion, but we'll talk about that another day. Back to Joey Aguilar and all that. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, he's already suing the NCAA, right? Well, he's been a part of a plaintiff of Diego Pavia's lawsuit. He voluntarily asked to get out of that about a week ago. They did. They granted his release. He hired a lawyer, and that lawyer that he hired, I'm blanking on his name. I've got it right here. He hired a lawyer, Cam Harris, to represent him. Cam Harris has already beaten the NCAA when they came after Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava a couple years ago. So Tennessee has a good relationship with Cam Harris already, but he's already beaten the NCAA in a couple of different cases, most notably the one with Nico Iamaleava just a couple of years ago. So the reason he's doing this is just to give himself another option. You've seen Trinidad Chambliss, and he's set for a preliminary injunction hearing on February the 12th with a court in Oxford, okay? You saw Charles Bediako, and I made jokes about it all last week, but the judge/booster or whatever that heard his case, that was in Tuscaloosa, okay? So putting it here in Knoxville, I'm not saying that the judge is a Tennessee fan or anything, or a Tennessee booster or anything. I'm not saying that, but you have a better chance of winning this locally than you do going into federal court. It makes all the sense in the world. Trinidad Chambliss has not officially gotten the green light yet, but gosh, I don't know how anybody can feel confident about what's going to come from the court systems, but everybody is just assuming Trinidad's going to be back playing for Ole Miss next year, which it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse a little bit. But anyway, everyone's just assuming that that's going to be the case. So you have a better chance of winning at a local level than you do in federal court, in my opinion. Adam Sparks puts into his story from the court documents, says, quote, if the court granted Aguilar relief from the NCAA's JUCO rule in the near term, Tennessee has a spot for him on the roster and would welcome him back. His compensation for playing college football in 2026 would be approximately $2 million, which would be about right. That would be a step up from what he made this year, which was around $1.2 million for Aguilar. The complaint also says that Aguilar needs to know now. He needs relief now to know whether or not he should report to spring practice or prepare for the NFL draft. He is currently not enrolled in classes, but Tennessee does do a midterm enrollee, midterm session, which is what Edwin Spillman and Caleb Beasley did a couple years ago when they arrived on campus the 1st of March, took a class, and they were ready to go for spring practice. Joey Aguilar could do something like that if there's some resolution here pretty soon. So they're fighting this at the local level, and according to the complaint, you're fighting this in the Knox County Court because, quote, the cause of the action arose here where Aguilar played football, seeks to play football again, and suffers injuries from the NCAA's unlawful conduct. Again, this is going back saying, like, hey, I couldn't profit off my name, image, and likeness when I was in junior college. I could profit off my name, image, and likeness when I was in NCAA member-instituted programs, which is where I was, Aguilar, at Appalachian State for 2 years, the semester of UCLA, and then, of course, here at Tennessee last year. So that's kind of what he's doing right now. Now, here's the difference, and Adam does a really good job of breaking this down in his report yesterday. Since he's no longer a part of the Diego Pavia lawsuit, remember, Diego Pavia is not going to play college football no matter what. It's just him and his legal team are leading the charge. They're not bound together whatsoever. So there's a preliminary injunction hearing for that case on February the 10th. If it is denied, that doesn't mean that Aguilar is going to be denied as well. If it is granted, that would mean Aguilar is not included in that because he's no longer a plaintiff. However, there would probably be another blanket waiver that would take care of Aguilar and other players like them, just like last year when the blanket waiver allowed against Star Thomas, Joey Aguilar, and other players as well to continue to play, Miles Kitzelman and other players around the country to play. So if Pavia's team wins its preliminary injunction hearing on February the 10th, it won't necessarily mean that Aguilar is good to go, but that's a really good sign, and a blanket waiver would probably follow, right? Or something along those lines. If it's denied, well, Aguilar is going to going by himself to try to get that injunction. Really, he's going to get a TRO, but ultimately he wants to get a preliminary injunction hearing that will allow him to be eligible to play in 2026. So if Pavia's case is denied, it's okay because, I wouldn't say it's a good thing, but you've got Joey Aguilar that's doing his own thing. If it's granted, well, that's a really good thing because in a roundabout way, Aguilar is going to be covered there as well. So I think this just gives you more options. I don't necessarily believe that it means like he's a shoo-in that he's going to be eligible. I don't really think it means one way or the other. I just think it means you're getting more options. And I do believe that doing it on the local level makes a whole lot more sense than doing it in federal court. So that's my opinion. Trying to talk about things I don't fully understand, and I'm not trying to act like an expert, so please don't believe I'm trying to be an expert on this topic, but that's kind of where I stand on that, and we will see what comes of this. But you knew it was coming whenever he got out of the Diego Pavia complaints last week, when he hired his own lawyer. You knew he was going to take NCAA to court on his own lawsuit at some point, and ultimately Adam Sparks reported that was going to happen on Monday. So we'll see about what date that is for the hearing and all that, but it's notable. Joey Aguilar is trying to play football again for sure, trying to make more money, and obviously I don't have to even say what that means and what that changes in regards to Tennessee football's offensive outlook for the 2026 season. Of course, that's obviously a conversation for another day.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're back in the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions start into play, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
The Kansas Jayhawks picked up their second straight ranked win last night, beating number 13 Texas Tech in Lubbock down the wire. Locked On Jayhawks host Derek Johnson recaps the win.
So this was a game that definitely you could tell Kansas was a more tired team. Both teams played on Saturday, though I guess you could say KU was a little later in the day, but I think it more had to do with the energy that KU got up to and the level of execution and shot making against BYU. It was just hard to replicate that, and to find a way to win this game, finishing on an 8-0 run. I don't know. It was kind of a weird game where the first half, first of all, we get the surprise that Christian Anderson's not going to go. And then you go from Kansas being a 4.5 point underdog coming into the game to all of a sudden, okay, maybe they should win this game without Christian Anderson. And it's kind of a back and forth first half. It felt like both teams at halftime were in a position where, for Texas Tech, they could argue, hey, we have no Christian Anderson. We got 2 fouls on top. And the fact that we're, within 3 is a good thing. For KU, you could have argued, Peterson at halftime is only 3 of 10 and feels like they've had too many turnovers and haven't gotten the offense going. And even despite that, they're up 3 points. And then Texas Tech goes on that big run to start the second half. And it felt like there were a couple kill shots in there that Tech just barely missed. And then it allowed KU to kind of find a bit of an opening, creep it back to within 7, creep it to within 5, creep it to within 3. And then eventually it was Darren Peterson, who did not score in the second half until the final 2 minutes or whatever it was, minute of the game. He hits back-to-back threes. Both of them, like the first one was an even tougher shot. I mean, the insanity of hitting that like over top and kind of fading back into the corner, incredible shot making. The second one was just like, incredible transition play that like he has made look easy so far this season. And, for Peterson, 5 of 14, one of his least efficient games of the season, ends up being one of his most notable because of how it finished for KU. Just what a finish in this game. And this is a gigantic win. It keeps the momentum going. It keeps the win streak going for KU. It puts them in a position now where I talked a lot about this. When you look at BYU and Texas Tech, those are 2 other teams that are going to be contending with you in this top, 6 or so of the Big 12. And it is really important for Kansas, in my estimation, to get a top 4 seed in the Big 12 tournament. One, because if you're a top 4 seed in the Big 12, it probably means you had a great season and you have an opportunity to go do good things. But it also means that you would get a double bye in the Big 12 tournament. And with some of the injuries and with some of the Darren Peterson stuff we've seen, getting a double bye would be very beneficial to KU. And so now you have the tiebreaker head-to-head against BYU and Texas Tech should it come up, because that's the only time you play both these teams this season. So a massive 2-game swing for KU, and overall just this win streak in general for KU as you get ready to play next week. Obviously you still have Utah later this week, but you still get ready next week to play, 2 of the best teams in the country. Banking some of these wins now becomes gigantic for KU. Now, some of the biggest positives of this game, I mean, Darren Peterson finishing the game, it's funny because it really does get coupled. Him finishing the game is what led to him hitting those late shots. And the idea that, like, I don't know, it felt like in some other games in the past, if KU was down 10 points, he was coming out and we don't know if we were going to see him again. He stayed in there for the long haul, and it wound up being the difference in this one, right? Like, Donovan Atwell had an excellent game defensively for Texas Tech, and it felt like KU maybe abandoned trying to get Peterson, a bunch of shots more than they probably should have when you have a guy who can make some of those shots we saw. But it wasn't really his night. Atwell was playing well defensively, and you kind of get into a situation where you're relying on others, but then they got him to the point that he needed to get, and he kind of took over. So it was a double moment. One, you see the clutchness of this dude, and 2, you get him to finish a game, which hasn't happened a ton for KU this year. Now he has, basically hit. I mean, the TCU game is a little different with how it happened. It's not a game winner, but him getting fouled and making the 3 free throws allowed KU to later win the game. I mean, that is a 2-game swing right there outside of just his normal contributions to the team. So gigantic there. I would also say in general, like, Melvin Council continues to be a stud for KU on the road. 16 points, 7 of 13, 7 rebounds. He was so good with his floater game in this one, and he continues to be, honestly, like, KU's most consistent player on the road this season has been Melvin Council, and that kind of continued in this game as well. I thought Flory had a solid game for KU, 14 points, 9 rebounds, get some blocks in there, went over on his point total over under, so thank you to Cash in that one for Flory. So those were all positives. I thought in general, like, another positive I'd point to, KU's 2-point defense was excellent in this game. Now, 3-point defense left something to be desired for a little bit there. It actually finished okay. Like, Tech hit 12 threes, but it was 30%. But the 2-point defense for KU, I mean, they went 12 of 40 from 3. They were 11 of 32 from 2 when they have the Big 12 Player of the Year, JT Toppin. So that was actually an incredible 2-point defensive game for KU. Now, if we are going to poke at some of the big negatives here that we were going to have to talk about up until the final, couple minutes of this game, the offense for the most part was not great for KU, which is weird because I'm looking at the stats right now and I'm like, oh, they shot 45% from the field. It did not feel that way for KU. I think part of it was because the 3-point shooting, I mean, they were, up until Darren Peterson hits those last 2 threes, they were 4 of 18 from 3. So the threes weren't falling. You're seeing Tech hit a bunch of threes. That made it feel not as good. You saw KU turn the ball over 15 times. What was supposed to be an advantage for KU getting the ball in the post wound up leading to just a bunch of turnovers in this game. That's kind of the big thing. I mean, 15 turnovers. This was a lower possession game. Like, Tech plays at a slower tempo. So in a higher possession game, that could have been an even higher number. And it felt like Tech kind of packed the paint and at times kind of said, hey, we're going to put the pressure on the official and see what they call. And, I think that was a good strategy for them. And KU wound up, struggling offensively for a majority of the game. And then I would say the other big negative in this one for KU, like, the defensive rebounding continues to be a problem. We saw it cost them the game against Utah or against UConn. It has been a problem in some of the games they've lost. It's been a problem in some of the games they've won. They were able to overcome it here. And it's something that, again, like, you hope that doesn't come up in March, but 14 offensive rebounds for Texas Tech compared to just 5 for KU. That was an issue for Kansas tonight. And then you almost give away the game late, but I guess at the end of the day, a win is a win. And, Darren Peterson getting it done, I think, makes it even more satisfying in a way from the standpoint of, like, the Texas Tech fans, what they were chanting. If you don't know what they were chanting in the game, I probably can't say it on here. I don't want to get in trouble, but you can probably look it up. And basically it was challenging Darren Peterson. Let's just put it that way. And, that makes it a little bit more sweet, right? And that's part of this too. Like, going back to the picture, I know I'm focusing on this again, but I guess in general too, you say, I know Marco wasn't very good tonight, but in general, after Saturday, not knowing the availability of Marco and Peterson coming into this game, the fact that you wound up, being able to even play Marco Jackson was obviously a good sign. Like I said, tonight was not a great game for Marco, but in general this season, he's had some games where he's given KU a lift and has been a pretty good defender. Again, not as much the case tonight, but, although he still ended up a +2 on the plus minus. But Darren Peterson gives you 35 minutes in this one. And it's not just that he finished the game and what he did, but, like, this was 35 minutes for Peterson on the road when you're traveling after short rest from the BYU game. And now you get extra rest before the Utah game. And I think the hope would be for Kansas, like, take advantage of that one so he gets to play less minutes for the following game against Arizona. But man, what a win that I'm still kind of scratching my head about in the most positive way for how the heck did KU do it? Because with the defensive rebound struggling at times, with Tech going off for threes at times, with a couple calls that maybe didn't go their way, with Peterson struggling and not scoring to those last couple buckets, with Trey White almost giving the ball away a couple times at the end there. I guess he did give the ball away, but almost giving the game away there at the end. Like, I'm like, how did they win this game? But at the end of the day, like I said, any road win you can get, let alone against a good opponent, even with them being out without one of their best players and one of the best players in the call, you take it and you run back to Lawrence, Kansas, and you're happy eating that W.
It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're back in the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions start into play, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Welcome back to the Big 6 and 60. The Grizzlies had lost 6 straight games before beating the Timberwolves last night behind 30 from Jaren Jackson Jr. Joe Mullinax from Locked On Grizzlies recaps the win.
I want to lead off with Cedric Howard. And I think it's important to lead off with Cedric Howard on this episode because he looked emphatically aggressive in this game. And I think that the reason I want to lead off with Ced is he was indicative of the Grizzlies as a whole. 35 free throws, partially because these officials were not the best. They called a lot of fouls, 66 total free throws between the two teams, multiple technical fouls. They got in trouble, almost losing control of the contest a couple of times. But the Grizzlies were aggressive getting to the charity stripe, and Cedric Howard was a good example of that. Cedric Howard had a dominant throw-down dunk late in the contest. It was kind of the cherry on top of the sundae of snapping the 6-game losing streak, the exclamation mark in one of the best all-around team performances that the Memphis Grizzlies have had in some time. 7 Memphis Grizzlies players scored at least 13 points. Gigi had 13. Vince Williams Jr. and Cam Spencer both had 16. Cedric Howard, previously mentioned, had 14. 18 for Jalen Wells, 19 in 20 minutes for Ty Jerome. Another really impressive performance for him, especially offensively. 8 assists, 6 rebounds. And again, Jaren Jackson Jr. had a 30-piece. We'll talk more about Triple J later on in the show. But I want to lead off with Ced because as this season progresses, if what we think is going to happen happens, and it's possible it doesn't, with Ja Morant being traded, DeMichael's talked a lot about that. I've talked a lot about that. There's a world where 72 hours or so from now, I guess, 48 hours, depending on when you're checking out this episode of the show, Thursday, when the trade deadline concludes, there's a chance Ja Morant is still a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. That's not what the Grizzlies organization wants. It might be what Ja wants, but as we've discussed, Ja kind of wants it on his terms, right? And we'll talk more about that later on in the program. But there's a chance Ja Morant is still a member of this franchise. And if that's the case, and he plays coming out of the trade deadline, once he's healthy, I should specify that he's currently on the injury report, out with that elbow injury. Once he's cleared to return to play, the way that the Grizzlies played against the Timberwolves, the way that the Grizzlies played in London against the Magic, that is a fun basketball team to watch. Quick side note, maybe the Grizzlies should just play each team in the NBA back-to-back games, right? Because the Magic game stands out in my mind's eye as the last time they looked this good, and that was the second game against the same team. Same thing here, right? The Grizzlies lose a tough one on Saturday night against the Timberwolves in FedEx Forum, and then a couple nights later, they get a chance to play the Minnesota Timberwolves again, and it looks like a different team. Jaren Jackson Jr. played in this game and not in the previous one, and that made a major difference. Again, we'll talk about Triple J here momentarily. But I come back to Cedric Howard because he checks 2 boxes for me. One, the aggression that I was talking about earlier, the physicality, the intensity. That needs to be prevalent every game possible moving forward the remaining of the season, regardless of what happens at the trade deadline. Because that is what's going to make this team watchable. The winning and the losing no longer matters. It doesn't apply. At least not for me. Maybe you still care. Maybe you're hoping they make a play-in push. And if they win some games and they get to the play-in conversation, I'm never going to belabor a team for actively competing. That's not the job of the players and the coaches to throw games. If the front office wants to tank, that's a front office decision. And if this Grizzlies team is going to truly tank, I think we saw exactly what is going to have to happen. And we'll talk more about that here in a bit. The Grizzlies that were on the court against the Timberwolves, the Minnesota Timberwolves who have made the Western Conference Finals the last couple of years, that Grizzlies team, I'm not saying they make the Western Conference Finals, but they're too good to tank. And that's assuming Zach Edey potentially returns to the lineup in the next month or so. Probably not. I'm speaking for myself, not to Michael. No inside source on this information. If Zach Edey doesn't play again this season, I wouldn't be surprised. But Ja Morant should return. Brandon Clark eventually will be out there. Scottie Pippen Jr. The team's good, too good to tank. They're too good to be bad. So if you prioritize trying to get in the best position possible in a loaded top end of the NBA lottery, this coming draft class, you're going to have to make some pretty seismic moves because that team that I saw, that you probably saw, and if you missed the game, at least find the highlights. That was the Tuomas Isalo offensive system. And I know I've been hard on Isalo throughout the season. Ty Jerome makes it work. Ty Jerome makes it click. Ty Jerome gets it. And I'm sure that's part of the reason why he chose the Grizzlies organization. That was part of reports when free agency hit. I think it was Chris Harrington of the Daily Memphian. I know DeMichael has talked about it as well. He saw what the vision was. And he felt that it would fit his skill set. And hot dang, through 2 games and 40 minutes of basketball, 20 minutes per game, Ty Jerome looks like the real deal. He's aggressive. He gets to the rim, just like Cedric Coward did on that emphatic dunk to close out the contest. So that aggression, that competitiveness, win or lose, no matter what happens over the next couple of days, that mentality needs to stick. And there also needs to be a continued investment in these young players. And we'll talk more about that later on in the show too. It can't just be Cedric Coward that I'm talking about on a night in, night out basis, or that DeMichael is talking about on a night in, night out basis. We need to continue to see investment in Gigi Jackson. We need to continue to see investment in Cam Spencer, even with Ty Jerome back. Because you could argue Ty Jerome and Vince Williams Jr. are the most direct negatives to Ty Jerome being reinserted into this rotation. And I want to stress, not complaining about Ty Jerome being on the court, but there's not enough minutes for all these guys if and when they all get off the injury report. So who sits? It can't be Cam Spencer. I don't want it to be Vince Williams Jr., but I know it can't be Cam Spencer because of what he brings to the table offensively, especially as a three-point shooter. We need to keep talking about him. We need to keep talking about Gigi Jackson. We need to keep talking about Jalen Wells, who had another really strong shooting performance, looking more comfortable, looking more in rhythm, not forcing things, being in a position to take advantage of looks, thanks to Ty Jerome and others, and maximizing those reps, maximizing those minutes. That needs to be a focus. Because regardless of whether Ja Morant is here or not, Jaren Jackson Jr., who we're about to talk about, whether he's here or not, whatever the direction is that the front office chooses, the coaching staff and the players are going to continue to compete. That level of execution, that level of energy, it's not always going to be perfect. The turnovers reared their ugly head in the second half as the Timberwolves tried to make a run, but that level of effort, that's what needs to be seen. And that effort has been questioned, whether it was against Charlotte and other games recently during this 6-game losing streak. Where was that energy? It was there on Monday. And if the Grizzlies can maintain that, win or lose, they'll be a much more fun and productive team to watch play. Jaren Jackson Jr., a 30-piece, as I mentioned earlier in the show, 11 for 11 from the charity stripe, excuse me. That would have been awesome if he had made 11 threes. But 11 for 11 from the free throw line, and that I love. That tells me that Jaren was aggressive, wasn't settling, wasn't launching threes. He took 6 threes, but he made 3 of them, and he, again, took 11 twos. So that 2-to-1 ratio is what I like when it comes to Jaren. He's aggressive, trying to get to the basket. Was that the last time that we see Jaren Jackson Jr. in Memphis? Because the Grizzlies obviously have a road game on Wednesday ahead of the trade deadline against the Sacramento Kings. Spoiler alert, I will not be on the Post Kings podcast. That is West Coast swing, and I am old and washed. For those of you that are everydayers, you know that I don't do West Coast swings at this point in my old and washed life. Do I think we've seen the last of Jaren Jackson Jr. in Memphis? My official answer is no. I don't think you have. Because I think that Jaren Jackson Jr., whether it's on the court as he did against the Minnesota Timberwolves on Monday night or off the court, you cannot find a better representative of the city from a Grizzlies organization standpoint than Jaren Jackson Jr. He is active in charity work. He is a Renaissance man. He has multiple interests outside the Grizzlies. He is a member of the Players Association. He does, or executive in the Players Association, excuse me. He does so much to represent Memphis and the Grizzlies well. And when he plays the way he did against Minnesota, he's an all-NBA player. Now, has that guy consistently been there this year? No. I think that's a fair thing to point out. Is he a really bad rebounder for his size? 6'11", 245. Yeah. I think it's fair to say that. You wish he could hit the glass a little bit more aggressively. But as I've said numerous times, I've written about it as well. You can long for what you want Jaren to be, or you can appreciate Jaren for what he is. And I think that Jaren Jackson Jr., what he is next to a center like Zach Edey, again, whether it's this season, next season, whatever the case might be, That allows for the best version of Jaren Jackson Jr. to shine. If a trade were to occur, it would need to be to a place that has a similar big man situation. A Philadelphia, Charlotte to a lesser extent. To me, the perfect fit is Detroit. Obviously, Jaren, a former Michigan State Spartan. Detroit is literally the number one team in the Eastern Conference, arguably the team with the best shot to reach the NBA Finals as of this recording out of the East. Imagine Jaren in Detroit next to Jalen Duren, newly minted All-Star Jalen Duren, Cade Cunningham. You could argue that Jaren would be the third best player on that Detroit team. And Jaren, as a third best player on a team, on the current Memphis Grizzlies, he is the best player, unquestionably. But you put him in Detroit, the Pistons are a legitimate NBA Finals contender, and then you get there against the Thunder or the Rockets or the Nuggets, and you see what happens. And Detroit knows that with Tatum out for Boston and with Halliburton out for the Pacers, the Eastern Conference is as wide open as it's ever going to be, or at least in the foreseeable future. So if you're going to take a swing and you need a really good power forward, if you can't get Giannis, and again, Giannis maybe you could argue is more of a center than a power forward at this point. If you can't get Giannis, Jaren Jackson Jr. is almost certainly the next best realistic target on the trade market. So if Detroit calls and offers Ron Holland and Jay Ivey and the contract of Tobias Harris, which expires this summer, and 3 first-round picks, that's hard to say no to. I don't know that Detroit offers that. At least not as a trade deadline deal. That would be pretty seismic. That'd be a big swing. And it would take something of that nature, I think, for the Grizzlies to move off of Jaren Jackson Jr. at this point. They want a young player and a first-round pick for Ja Morant. And again, as awesome as Ja can be when he's on the court, the greatest ability in life is availability. And Ja Morant has not had that for 3 years. So do I think Jaren Jackson Jr. has played his last game in Memphis? No. Because I don't see the Grizzlies launching a full tank rebuild over the next 48 to 72 hours. Is it possible? Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, this team as constructed, if they're able to be on the court, is too good to tank. The Timberwolves are conspicuous by their absence in the teams that I just listed. As I mentioned earlier in the program, the last 2 Western Conference Finals have featured the Minnesota Timberwolves. They are a team that is mentioned in the conversation for Giannis in terms of a trade. The Timberwolves want to be in that mix to get to the NBA Finals finally. The Thunder look more susceptible to being beat than they have in some time. It's possible, not probable, but possible, that the reigning champs could struggle in the conference finals or even before then. Do the Grizzlies find it within themselves to say, we want to move on fully from this era of basketball? It's tough. I'm of the mind that they say no, because Jaren is that good soldier. Jaren is that representative of the organization. Jaren just signed a contract extension. The Grizzlies had a chance to sign a contract extension with Ja Morant this summer, and they said no. Jaren Jackson Jr. got his extension. The Grizzlies made roster moves to make sure that extension could get signed.
That's all for today's Big 6 in 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, or on campus going up every weekend just like we do here. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA, the Big 3 in 30 NFL, or the Big 3 in 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.